Hi friends, I'm Jitin Paula. In this video, I would like to share an idea on the intellectual class in colonial period. You see that one of the major outcomes of Western domination in India was the emergence of an intellectual class. English education brought the native youth in contact with a body of thoughts like liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, and rationalism. These thoughts openly questioned many of the fundamental assumptions upon which the fabric of Indian traditional society, Indian traditional values rested. The intellectual class was a product of, a product of a diffusion of English language and culture throughout India. The terms like middle class, literati, Western educated elite, Bhadralok means respectable folk, and intelligentsia all have been used to describe this particular class, this modern class. Macaulay's Minute of 1835 is very familiar for all of us. Macaulay's famous Minute on Education expressed the intention of the continuous domination of British in India as to create a class of people, Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, in morals, and in intellect. That means the basic intention of Macaulay Minute was to create a class of people in favor of them to fulfill the administrative necessities of British in India. That was the major intention behind the Macaulay Minute. You must note that this intellectual class, Western educated elite, literati, intelligentsia, Bhadralok, was the real byproduct of the Macaulay Minute of 1835. You all know that in Europe, in England, in India in particular, there had a heating debate between the supporters of Orientalism and the utilitarians. Orientalists, they demanded what? To promote education in India through vernacular languages. But here, Anglicists or utilitarians, they demanded what? The diffusion of education through English. Macaulay Minute of 1835 marks the success of success of Anglicists over the utilitarians. By this minute of 1835, English language implemented in India as the official language. English language implemented in India as the official language for learning. You see that it was in Bengal that the British rule was established first, and there was a spread of modern education in Bengal for the first time in India. So, there, that means in Bengal, the first group of modern intelligentsia emerged. This intelligentsia or intellectual class community was far from homogeneous group. That means the term intelligentsia class or intellectual class is a common usage. Within that broad framework, there were number of classes, there were number of professional groups. You must note that. According to B.B. Misra, this intellectual class include first one, high salaried officers, then another group, the main body of civil servants, then another group, the members of principal recognized professions such as lawyers, doctors, professors, writers and journalists. They belonged to this particular group, intellectual class. Then another important strata of this intellectual class was that the students of esteemed educational institutions, Then, according to Biban Chandra, that means Biban Chandra defines intellectuals as the intellectual representatives of new Indian classes and of Indian nationalism. That means they were the byproducts of English education. They were the torch bearer of Indian nationalism. They were the torch bearer of Indian social reform. They were the representatives of new Indian classes, so on. Then another important scholar, Deepesh Chakravarti is a very famous historian. According to Deepesh Chakravarti, this class, that means intellectual class, are the advocates of political modernity. They are the advocates of political modernity. What is political modernity? Political modernity consisting of such concepts as citizenship, the state, civil society, public sphere, human rights, equality before law, the individual, distinction between public and private, the idea of the subject, democracy, popular sovereignty, social justice, scientific rationality and so on. Point is that the educated Indians, in fact, deployed what? The tools of political modernity. They deployed tools of political modernity to construct their own critique of an autocratic and arrogant colonial state, and they mix it. Here means the intellectual class mix what? Political modernity with an emotional patriotic belief in the superiority of Indian culture and civilization. That means these intellectuals, they gained Western education, they gained rational ideas. At the same time, they placed what? Indian culture as superior. Indian culture, they claimed the superiority of Indian culture, Indian civilization over any other cultures and civilizations in the world. That is very extremely significant point regarding the nature of intellectual class in colonial India. Then let us examine the traits of intellectual class. The intellectual class or intelligentsia that emerged in India displayed what? Certain predominant traits and tendencies. First one is faith in progress. They were the advocates of progress. You see that idea of progress was an important feature of what? European Enlightenment. European Enlightenment. Here, Indian intellectuals borrows the idea of progress from Britishers. They learned the idea of progress from the educational institutions established by the British in India as an aftermath of Macaulay Minute and Wood's Dispatch. After Wood's Dispatch, there were a number of universities of Calcutta, University Bombay, University of Madras, all came into existence. Many Indians, they got education from these reputed institutions. They propagated what? The idea of progress. Idea of progress which demanded what? Reform and change. Reform and change within the existing order. Within the existing order of Indian society. Then another important trait of this particular class, intellectual class, was the willingness and readiness to secure legal rights and privileges. Legal rights and privileges. You see that one of the most important features of the early struggles conducted by Indian National Congress, moderate Congress in India was their major demand was the attainment of constitutional rights, attainment of constitutional privileges. They frequently demanded what? Equality before law. They demanded liberty. They demanded the enlargement of various councils with an increase of Indian representatives. Then another feature of this particular class, another trait of this particular class was that their fight for removing what? The restrictions of feudal nature. That is very important. This intellectual class was in fact a product of British capitalism. A product of British capitalism. The British educational policies in India were very close with the elements of capitalism. That is why their education, their syllabus, their theories, their practices were closely affiliated with the elements of capitalism. That is why here One of the most important enemies of educated elite intellectual class was feudalism. They vehemently criticized, these educated people vehemently criticized what? The agents of feudalism. One of their major aims was to distract the elements of feudalism, feudalistic restrictions, etc. Then another important trait of this particular class was that this class emphasized the principle of equality, principles of modernity, principles of enlightenment, principles of rationality, etc. Then another important trait was that these people, this class, they tried to create what? Public opinion and arouse political consciousness, particularly from 1870s onwards. Creation of public sphere was an important byproduct of the emergence of this particular class. They established reading rooms, they established clubs, they established social forms, and within these establishments there had a democratic method. These establishments, they formed in major cities of India, and there had a connection between various organizations, various forms, and various clubs. So through this link, they transmitted their ideas, they exchanged their ideas and values. That is why they created public space, public sphere in India for the first time in modern Indian history. Then another important trait of this particular class was in the economic field. In the economic field, they supported, this class, intellectual class, supported enterprise, focused attention on the suppression of peasantry and the exploitation of the country. That means here we have a best example, the drain of wealth theory of Dadabhai Navroji. Drain of wealth theory of Dadabhai Navroji was in fact a clear-cut manifestation of the economic exploitation done by the British in India. Then another important trait of this particular class, intellectual class in India, was that this class represented what? Represented the voice of dissent. And on many occasions, that of challenges towards a traditional and conservative society. They wanted to destroy what? Traditional society. Many of them firmly believed that traditional society is the main agent of the backwardness of India that time. That means they criticized social evils and the shackles imposed by the traditional society. The major agent of traditional society that time was the religion. They criticized, here they criticized some social practices like sati, polygamy, child marriage. They promoted what? Education for women, widow remarriage, abolition of caste system, etc. That is the important trait of this particular class. Surendranath Banerjee, you all know that Surendranath Banerjee, an important leader of nationalist movement, early nationalist Surendranath Banerjee, he attested that that means by the end of the 19th century, the first theorist of Indian nationalist movement, Surendranath Banerjee, gave currency to the concept of a new middle class, which was born from the impact of Western culture on Indian society. And according to Surendranath Banerjee, this class, intellectual class, was the carrier of enlightenment, carrier of freedom, carrier of progress, carrier of prosperity in India. As a conclusion, I would like to say that this particular class, this particular entity, middle class, played an important role behind almost all developments that took place in India in between 1850 to 1947 in colonial period. They were the torch bearers of social reform movement. They were the torch bearers of political developments. They were the torch bearers of nationalism, etc. Thank you.